hey, Justin, welcome to an episode here. Love to talk about junior high ministry and with you for a little bit and just share some of your insights into the world of junior high ministry. You've been in lots of different churches, not a lot, but a few great churches, and now working for a nonprofit. So I'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your ministry journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, first of all. And I love your podcast title. I missed the title of pastor, not just the role of it, but I love being Pastor Justin. I haven't been Pastor Justin in a little while now. So I love the podcast title, and thanks for having me on. So yeah, I worked at a couple really great churches. I got my start at a small church in Huntington Beach that's gone through a whole rebranding now. I think it's Christ Pacific Church now. But then spent most of my time at Mariners Church in Irvine, which is a church I actually still attend. I'll be going there this weekend, the very first weekend. They're doing live gatherings with my wife. And then and I worked at a church called Sandals Church, which blew up in my face, was not a great move. And it actually taught me a lot. I'm really thankful for that time there, but it did not work out. I lasted about 9 months there. And then it kind of sent me on like this crazy journey of figuring out, well, what I was going to do and who am I as a leader and all the things that typical people struggle with and trying to figure out. And it took me on probably a 1.5 year journey of working through that and got to connect with some really cool people through that journey who helped me, to kind of different guides along the way. And now I found myself landed at a great nonprofit that's based out of Orange County, California, not too far from where I live. And I'm the executive director of it. And, it's all about connecting mothers and daughters and fathers and sons and into service together. I'm developing them as leaders for not just the local and global church now, but, for the future. And it's a whole lot of fun, really cool parents involved, a lot of chapters in Orange County, and we're looking to spread, with chapters really all over the country. So this year's gonna be a really fun year of expansion and growth for us.
That's great. I love it. So you're also the host of the Controlled Chaos podcast. So tell us a little bit about, it's a book, it's a kind of a movement, even kind of a junior high ministry philosophy, you could say. So just tell us a little bit about the book, about the kind of the strategy and the podcast.
Well, the lingo of Controlled Chaos, I would give credit, obviously, to Kurt Johnston for coining it. He wrote a book a long time ago, probably I forget when the book even came out, the early 90s or very early 2000s, and it was called Controlled Chaos. And I read it. I remember reading it. I was interviewing for the job in Huntington Beach. I was going to interview for the high school job. They offered me the junior high job. I knew nothing about junior high ministry. Came back to my college, read Controlled Chaos along with middle school ministry by Mark Ostreicher and Scott Rubin, all three guys I consider to be good friends now. And years later, so now we fast forward almost a decade, and it was my wife of all people that challenged me to start a podcast. And she said, you should do a junior high ministry one. Why don't you? And I had a lot of reasons why not to, long stories I'm not going to get into. But I actually reached out to a couple people to ask their opinions, like, hey, should I do this? Is it the right time? And I got a lot of positive affirmation that, yeah, go for it. You should do it. And when it was kind of time to figure out names, Josh Griffin from DYM is actually the one that suggested Controlled Chaos. I reached out to Kurt to ask his permission, which he generously gave, which turned into him being on a couple of episodes, which turned into him really co-hosting it for probably 6 months. And me and him randomly did a rewrite or an update of Controlled Chaos, the book, and re-released it with Mark Ostreicher and the Youth Cartel a couple of years ago. And it's just been a ton of fun. I took some time off the podcast a little bit, but now we're back into it with a really fun summer series. I don't know when this episode's posting, but we're doing a whole summer series called Stereotypes, and it's just been a blast. I've been really enjoying it, and I still love junior high ministry, love youth workers, love the podcast. I'll do it until I'm not, enjoying it anymore, and I'm still loving it right now. So it's a pretty good deal.
All right. So I want to jump right in here to some heated topics. All right. I feel like you're ready for it. So let's jump in. Let's solve or talk about one of the biggest debates in all of youth ministry. All right. So in your opinion, should churches highly consider or really need to go for a separated junior high school ministry?
Here's the thing. Some churches, so let's just talk philosophically. when you put junior high and high school kids together, you have a completely different dynamic. So what is your philosophy of ministry? Is it just, well, I want to, just preach the gospel to everyone. I want to get everyone, and I want to tell them about Jesus, and hopefully we get them plugged into a group. That's great. I'm for that. But when you put junior high and high school students together, it changes the dynamic. Junior hires are always going to be who they are. They're not going to change based on who's in the room. Typically, like, they're still going to run around and be crazy. Like, they still view high school students like high school students. They don't view them like adults. They view adults like adults. So high school students are the ones who are going to say, oh, I don't really know if I want to be here if a bunch of junior high kids are running around, which I've seen that. That's something I experienced at Sandals. We had a huge dip in high school ministry that was recorded over time because they just didn't want to be around junior high kids that are running around doing fart jokes. So there's a trade-off. I mean, there's a trade-off there. Now, the other side of it is, if your ministry or your church is small enough where you don't have like that critical mass, and everyone says, well, what is critical mass? Critical mass is whatever you determine critical mass is. For some people, critical mass is 20. For some people, it's 100. Some of it depends on the size of the building, the size of the room you're in. If you have a room that fits 50 people, critical mass, becomes 30. If you have a room that fits 200 people, critical mass becomes 120. So it's not just like, well, once you hit number X, and which is a globally agreed upon number, critical mass for your church, your space is different than someone else. So if you're a really small church where bringing everyone together is going to, you only have 10 high school kids and 8 junior high kids, well, doing everything together makes sense. Grow them as much as you can, hit whatever critical mass you determine is the number, and then split them when the time comes. I think the other thing people forget about is, and I'm pro-student, okay? I'm pro-student. Thing we tend to forget about is families that have kids in multiple different grades, and the staff that we have and the volunteers that we have. We can put junior high and high school separately, separate nights, whatever. But if we only have one youth pastor, then we're asking that guy or girl to sacrifice a lot of time with their family, a lot of time with their kids. If we have a lot of families that have kids in junior high and high school, we're asking them to do separate nights. We're asking the family not to do dinner together. We're asking the family to really be the chauffeur. And those are unintended consequences to what we would say our goal is, right? We want to disciple kids, and we want to get them in a place where they can be with their peers and blah, 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 all the Christian stuff. But the reality is, the unintended consequences, to me, become the things that we really need to look at. How many volunteers do we have? What is the volunteer health? What's the youth staff look like? What's their health look like? What does the youth pastor's spouse say about this? Are they pro them being out multiple nights a week? Are they going to end up hating them for it? And, is that how you're going to burn out your youth pastor? It's easy to run junior high and high school separate when you have a junior high pastor and a high school pastor. When you only have one, are you going to pay them double for doing the job of being the high school pastor and the junior high pastor? Most churches are going to say hell no to that. So those are things that we don't talk about. We only talk about the student side, which, again, I'm pro-student, but you can't have a healthy student ministry with an unhealthy staff. You can't have a healthy student ministry with unhealthy volunteers. You can't have a healthy student ministry with an unhealthy family ministry, as defined by parents becoming chauffeurs and no one having dinner together. So I'm pro separating them for sure. If we've answered a lot of these questions over here, if we have a strategy and a system and a game plan for this, maybe the youth pastor doesn't need to be there for every single one every single week. Maybe we're going to raise up volunteers. Maybe the senior pastor is going to come and speak sometimes and lead, depending on what the church size looks like. Maybe we're going to bring in the popular kids person to teach in junior high sometimes, because they remember a lot, and we're going to break down silos. They remember those students. Maybe a lot of stuff. But in the end, what kind of solutions are we going to create to allow us in a healthy way to separate both junior high and high school? That's what I'd say. And I'm pro separating them, by the way. I think it needs to be done. It needs to be done in a healthy way for everybody.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is size of your church, size of your ministry has a big part to play into that, making that decision. And is it sustainable? Is it healthy for all the people, the family, the youth pastor? Not just, is this going to grow our youth ministry, but is it really healthy and sustainable long-term? Is a big question for you.
When we only look through the lens of, well, the students, right? We want more students and we want to grow that. Of course we want more students. Of course we want to grow things, but healthy things grow where you water it. And so if we're not putting any water on the health of how we structure the ministry, the fruit that we're trying to grow is at its core going to be unhealthy. You can't get healthy fruit from an unhealthy ministry. You can't get healthy fruit, students, relationships from burnt out staff and volunteers. Like you can't have healthy fruit if the youth pastor is going home and they're getting from their wife or their husband about how the church is really the mistress in their relationship. Like that's not creating health in the ministry. You're not going to get healthy fruit from that dynamic. So senior leadership, it's easy to say, oh, let's just separate them, or my high school kid doesn't like being with junior hires. Yeah, that's true. But it's not just as simple as, well, I guess we'll just split them. Like it's not like that. There's so many things to look at, and I'm really zeroing in on the health side. Once you start looking at the budget side and some of the other pieces, how do we do camps? Do we do camps differently now? Do we do events differently now?
Yeah.
There's just so many other things. Is senior leadership going to back us up when we say, hey, we need to double our volunteer team? And they say, oh no, just work with the volunteers you got. It's like, wait, what are you talking? Are you crazy? Have you been drinking? Like that's insane. But that tends to be the difficulty of what a lot of youth pastors are dealing with when it kind of start uncovering and digging through this question.
Yeah, that's great. So I think a lot of people have combined groups. So let's talk about how do we meet the needs or help meet the needs of those junior hires, even when we have a combined group, right? Because like I said, I think most people that are watching, listening, have combined groups. So how do they have specific junior high meet those needs even in the midst of a combined group? Suggestions there.
Yeah, so this to me is such an easy question that a lot of people just don't want to put the time into, because it takes intentionality, it takes time, it takes planning. Let me give you the easiest example. Okay, are you married?
Yep.
Are you married?
Oh yeah.
Have you ever done dinner with your wife and maybe her parents, or maybe another other family or something, like people that you and your wife and other people are there at this dinner?
Yeah.
Okay, I do this stuff all the time. And when I go out to dinner, I'm holding my wife's hand, I'm putting my hand on her leg. I'm a romantic guy. Okay, I'm giving her a different type of attention than I give everyone else in the room. Now, when it comes to junior high ministry, it's the exact same thing. We need to know how to give junior high ministry a different type of attention than what we're giving the entire room. If what we give the entire room is the exact same product, everyone's going to hate it. Because either we're going to be making it too adult, which I think junior high can be pulled up a little bit, but it's either going to be too adult for the junior hires because we're really trying to target high school, which really is a year or two above high school, or we're going to make it really for the junior hire, and the high school students are going to look at you and be like, this is so cheesy, this is lame. So how do you do both? If you have everyone in the same room, intentionally plan out the spaces that are made for junior high. Intentionally plan out the things that you do that are for, maybe you end in worship and you dismiss the junior hires early because they're not going to just do the last worship song. They're going to actually go do like something experiential. Like they just learned about breaking strongholds, and they're going to go out there and with bricks and a hammer, they're going to smash it while the high school students are doing the last worship song. Now that's an idea off the top of my head. That's not even the best idea. Maybe during the planning phase, you decide that you're going to bring the junior hires in 15 minutes early to let the high schoolers still kind of hang out and mingle, a little coffee shop area deal. Bring the junior hires in 15 minutes early to do all the high energy, crazy, insane games. And then everything started. The junior hires, they're kind of led into the pre-show. And this is all the language, right? Hey, junior high, you guys are going to be part of the pre-show. High school, you guys aren't invited. You guys are going to stay out by the coffee shop area and hang out. Junior hires are thinking, oh my God, this is going to be awesome. Like we're going to do awesome stuff. Yeah. Like it's just for us. And the high schoolers are thinking, thank God they're out of here so I can like match this girl. Thank goodness. Thank you for, and then we get in the room, then we do a couple of the things that we're all going to do together. Then we teach and then we figure out like, do we separate for teaching? Some people do that. They bring everyone together for the, hey, how's it going? Let's play a big group game. All right, let's worship. All right, we're going to teaching. Junior high, head out that door. A good friend of mine, they did that exact thing at their church. I don't know if they still do that, but they bring everyone together and do the fun stuff. They do worship, and then they split them off. I actually think they split them off for worship too, and they did worship separately. So you can still get everyone together on the same night, do a couple of things together, and then split in separate rooms. And if you don't have separate rooms, then I know it's difficult. This is the work of being intentional, figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
Maybe you lopside doing everyone together, and then students go out of the room to do groups around the church and then come back in for worship. Like it takes intentionality to figure out exactly what it looks like for you, but there is a way to do it. It's just not saying, all right, well, we're going to give everyone the exact same product and I hope they like it and let's just hope for the best. That's never going to work.
Yeah. So you hit on it a little bit, but what about for those guys that are teaching to the whole group, and they're preaching to the whole group, right? Are you suggesting, there's that big debate. Do I kind of preach in the middle there, kind of like that freshman age? Do I kind of teach down a little bit? Do I teach up and hope that the junior hires follow and stay?
If you have everyone in the room, my target would be sophomore. That's who I would speak to, because it's going to pull all the junior hires up. Yeah, the juniors and seniors is kind of pulling them down a little bit, and it's meeting the freshman, sophomore kind of exactly right where they're at. But because there's no perfect answer for that. If you speak way too high up here, all the junior hires are going to look around. They're genuinely going to say, I have no idea what they talked about tonight. Yep. And if you speak too low down here, then all of the high school students are going to be looking at you like, this is cheesy. I feel like I'm back in kids' church. So right in that sophomore age range, which the thing I love about Orange is they've produced a lot of really good stuff. And so is Sticky Faith and Fuller Youth Institute, to really get in the mind of that age group. So you can really get uniquely in the mind of a sophomore, not just what they say they need, but what psychologists would agree to. Like, hey, at this life stage of the sophomore life stage, these are the things that really connect with them. And then you cater your talks a little bit toward that direction. Now, here's the thing. That is not easy. It takes time. It takes intentionality. It takes planning. It's not thrown together. And if you're good with that, then you can have a successful path forward. But it's not just throwing it together last minute or grabbing some curriculum and just kind of going up there and winging it. That'll never work. People will leave disappointed, and then they will not come back.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like both are a lot of work, right? To separate is a lot of work, to have 2 nights, 2 different groups, whatever. But even staying together needs to be a lot of work too. And I think that's something.
Well, I think you're hitting on something obvious, which is ministry is a lot of work. Doing ministry well will always be a lot of work. Doing crappy ministry, it is so easy to do crappy ministry. I know a lot of people who do it. So it's really easy. And if doing really good ministry was that easy, then everybody's ministries would be growing. Everybody would be retaining staff long-term. Everybody would have a culture where their parents where years later, parents are still like, oh my God, I'm so bought in. I love it. When parents become your key evangelists and recruiters of other families to come check out your church, that's when you know you have something going really well. Yes, that's hard work. Not everybody wants to do that level of work. That's why youth pastor turnover is still what it is in this country. And that completely sucks, by the way. But yeah, ministry is hard work, regardless of how you structure it.
Yeah. All right. So junior hires, what are some of the key elements that youth pastors should be thinking about? These are some of the key elements that we need to include, be focusing in on, especially right now, as you know, we're still in the middle of all this COVID stuff and people are reinventing youth ministry, reinventing a lot of the stuff they're doing. So what are some of those key elements that say, man, if we really want to hit junior high ministry, these are some of the core elements that we really need to be focusing in on and asking questions around?
Well, here's the thing. It's the word fun. I'm going to use the word fun as an acrostic. Okay, and this is what I'm going to say. Fun is for F, united, and next. Okay, these are the words I'm going to cue in on. Junior high ministry, fun is the universal language of junior high students. It was when Kurt wrote the first Controlled Chaos book. It was when I started Controlled Chaos podcast. Fun is still the universal language of junior high. Marco talks about anyone who spent time in junior high knows, and also has been around, more of the country or more of the world, knows that it doesn't matter where you are. If you're with junior hires and you throw a ball in the middle of the field, kids kind of know what to do. Fun is a universal language. Yep. So if you're doing boring stuff, then just find something else to do for a career, because that's not what junior high students want or need. Fun is the universal language of junior high ministry. If you're not having fun, if you're not creating fun experience, fun environments, fun moments for them, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. And actually, you're probably doing more harm than good, because during those pivotal years where they're starting to decide core things that they believe. If you don't know this, go watch the movie Inside Out. It's probably the best junior high ministry psychological movie that's ever been made. These was made with experts that helped bring visual and narrative to the young adolescent mind. And they are going through this change where they're figuring out what they believe and how they react to stuff and their personality in new ways. And if you teach them at a young age that church is boring, then they will carry that with them for many, many years. And maybe they can shake it, but the statistic, I think, still is 70% of people that come to faith in Jesus do so during the middle school to early high school years. So that's number one, fun, united. Yep. You need to create a ministry that they feel like they're not an add-on to the ministry. They're going through this very awkward time, right? Kids ministry made sense, right? That made sense. I was in kids ministry, and I had to get a bathroom pass, and I couldn't go anywhere without my parents. Now, as we get into junior high, especially in a lot of demographic areas, there's more freedom to hop on your bike and go somewhere. There's more freedom to do more sleepovers. There's more freedom to do all-nighters. Your first sleepaway camp tends to happen during the junior high years. Your first big moments of your life in general happen during the first junior high years. The first time you're rejected from a sports team, the first time you get your heart broken. A lot of those things happen. The first big crush, like serious crush, happens during the junior high years. So helping them feel united to the ministry. It's not just junior high ministry, the silo. It's junior high ministry, a part of the church. If you get them serving in other areas of the church, if you get them connected with, the high school staff and high school students coming in regularly, telling them, you're awesome, I think you're great, you're hilarious, like those words of affirmation, that helps them feel united to the body of the church. You get older people in the church not yelling at them for running too fast, but instead encouraging them for being there. That helps them feel united to the whole body of the church. So being united is so key. And then next, it doesn't, pandemic or not, you should always have the next step for your students kind of figured out. Like, where am I trying to take them spiritually? I know where they're going developmentally. How am I going to leverage that for the spiritual goals, the church goals, the family ministry goals that we have? Like, what's the next thing? A very poor junior high ministry will be stuck in one mode for too long, and they'll suffer for it. An example of this, social media is a great example of this. A lot of churches held out on social media for too long, and they were just completely surpassed by a generation grade of kids who this was part of their normal life. And there are churches like, oh, that's too in the world, man. I want to be in the world, not of the world. And it's like, okay, well, you're not relevant then. So kids will absolutely check you off the list, and they will move on. So if you're not tuned into not just what is next in your spiritual goals, but how to leverage what's happening in culture, and create that as an impact into what's next in their life in the church, that is vital. The ministries that don't have plans, chances are will fail 90% of the time. And not having a plan is failure, by the way. It's not, you don't get points for not planning, so there was nothing to fail at, so you still get points. No, not having a plan is failure, because success is, and we know what success is, right? Making disciples of all nations, being baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. They're able to be, leaders on their campus, that they're bringing their friends to know who Jesus is. They're making their faith their own, not their parents' faith, but their faith. All these things youth pastors know and executive staff know, but that comes at a price, and the price is the cost of planning, and not just saying, oh, it'll work itself out, or man, we're in such a good rhythm right now. Well, yeah. A good rhythm right now becomes the stagnant staleness of tomorrow. So being in a rhythm, that's my first red flag. Don't be in a rhythm, be in a routine, and a routine of shaping culture, innovation, thinking about what's next. That should be your routine. Constantly assessing, constantly getting feedback. If you're in a rhythm that just keeps on going forever, soon that will become stale. A routine is what tells us, okay, I'm going to get assessment. I'm going to ask for feedback. I'm going to send out a survey. I'm going to watch what's happening in culture. Okay, I'm going to get with my volunteer team or my student leadership team. I'm going to have real discussions. I'm going to ask tough questions. I'm going to listen to their feedback. I'm going to make strategic changes based on that feedback. That's a routine. Don't be in a rhythm, be in a routine to figure out what's next.
That's great. That's great. All right, I want to switch gears here a little bit. So on episode 122 of the Controlled Chaos podcast, you have a great title, and I want to unpack it a little bit. So I want to read it. It says, "No, it's not okay to call your student a racist." All right, so this is the backstory here is there was a post on a youth pastor group that, basically said, hey, the student was saying some things. Is it okay for me to say this? And you just simply responded with, no, it's not okay to call your student a racist. And I saw that post. I saw your response, and I sat on it for a little bit, and then I saw your episode. So I'd love for you to unpack a little bit of that and tell us just a little bit, in the episode, you unpack some of your thoughts of how to kind of navigate this season. So I'd love for you just to kind of share some of your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's really simple. I thought that was a pretty regularly accepted response, and I was shocked to see so many people had very different opinions on it. Well, did what they say was what they said, was it actually racist? Because if it was, then maybe you should say something. Or were there other people around? Or like there were all these qualifiers. And here's the thing. It's never okay to call your student a racist. They could say the most racist thing ever. It's not okay to give them a label that they haven't taken for themselves. It's not okay to reaffirm an unhealthy label. It's not okay to just turn in your pastor card and become the political police. It's not okay for you to trade in the platform of teacher and leader to be social justice advocate, warrior, guy or girl. It's just not okay. Students don't just say stuff like it. They haven't determined every idea and everything that they believe yet. Students are repeating things they've heard at home. They're repeating things they've heard just on the news or whatever, Instagram they follow. They're repeating stuff that they think is okay to say, or they're making a joke that they think is funny. And by the way, kids make jokes that are off color all the time. So do I. So they're not doing these things maliciously. So for us in our hypersensitive wokeness as pastors, which is, by the way, not our job, to determine that, oh, you are this, and I need to condemn you. Doesn't matter who's there. Doesn't matter the impact it's going to leave on you. Doesn't matter your relationship with Jesus and where it's at or how you view the church. None of those things matter. What matters is that there's an injustice, and I need to put everything else aside to just target that injustice. And by targeting that injustice, I'm really targeting you, because you as a young person cannot see the difference between you being attacked as a person and you being reprimanded or given the chance to think through and assess your own ideas and how'd you come to those ideas and why do you feel that way, and let's have a conversation about it. and not just throw a label on a kid. I think it's so funny how we will be so quick to give the Bible lesson about labels, and we do the name tag thing, and then we pull our name tag off, and let's go to camp and put our name tag on something, and that's not who you are. But then we're so quick to just throw a label on someone if it's culturally appropriate or woke to do that. It makes me want to throw up. I think it's totally gross. And we had a whole episode talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's great to really realize that part of it is, especially junior hires are going to say things and they aren't even aware. Like you said, they're just repeating what they've heard. And for us to come alongside them and say, hey, just so you know, that comment could be perceived this way, as opposed to saying, well, you've thought through this, what you're saying, you're premeditated, all this kind of stuff. And now, but to say, hey, let's talk about, I know that there's been many times where, when I was in junior high, my parents had to walk me through those moments of saying, hey, here's, outside of what's being said on the campus, here's how it's translated in the world, and walking me through those. And so as youth pastors, that's part of our job, is to walk people through those moments.
I know students who not know personally, but I know of cultures where students are legitimately racist. I read this news article someone sent me about these two girls in the white Aryan movement. This is totally nuts, by the way, that they are, total white power crazy people. They're both teenage girls. They've been doing this for a while now. They started when they were in junior high, actually, and they write and perform songs about white power and purifying the race. All things that is gross. I completely disagree with. I find it reprehensible, disgusting. I wouldn't advocate for it. I actually would speak out against it publicly. I think it's reprehensible. But I also think that junior high kids are not waking up saying, you know what I want to do today? I want to start writing songs about racism and how white people are better than everyone else. That's what I want to do. No kid is saying that. It's parents who are inserting those ideas, inserting those thoughts. Now, here's the thing. I'll go down on those parents and give them a hard time anytime, because I think what we expose our kids to is vital. That determines how they're going to grow up. Deuteronomy 6 talks about the responsibility of parents, that it's their responsibility to teach them to follow the Lord, right? That as they lay down and as they wake up and as they walk along the road and go to bed and yada, 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 they're raising their kids up in the ways of the Lord. And so people obviously do the opposite of that. They raise their kids up in the absolute worst ways, but it's a big sign that we as Christians should pay attention to, that how we raise our kids actually really does matter. The things we say around our kids, the way we talk to our kids, they hear us, they listen to us, and they want to imitate. I just started working out recently, I'm like a weekend, less than a weekend, but I've decided I'm going to run a mile every day. I'm going to do some weight stuff, and I'm just going to do some healthy stuff. And my 3-year-old kid, every day he wants to work out with dad. He doesn't know anything about working out. He doesn't know how to work out. All he knows is that dad says he's going to work out, and he wants to put his shoes on, his shorts on, and he wants to go work out with dad. He has no concept of what running a mile uphill is like. He has no concept of it. He just wants to copy what mom and dad are doing. It's the same thing. You may have a kid who, by all accounts, legitimately has racist ideas and has racist comments to make, and would say, yeah, I'm totally a racist. I think white people are better than every other race, and we should eliminate. That is disgusting, and that is racism, by the way, 100%. That kid did not come up with those ideas themselves. To label them, to trade in your card of influence for the cheap win of letting them know that they are what they already believe they are and want to be based on what they've heard mom or dad or uncle or whoever talk about, is a huge mistake. It'll have bigger consequences than I think we're willing to pay tribute to. And whenever there's the woke culture moment, is usually the worst time to change our philosophy or strategy on how we pastor and lead students. If a kid did something, egregious at church, we've all learned this. At least we should have learned this at Bible college at some point when we talk about youth dynamics and group dynamics, that you say, hey, I want to talk to you afterwards. You don't do it in front of people. Hey, I want to talk to you afterwards. Hey, can we talk about what happened? Listen, I'm so happy you're here. I love having you here. you start off with an affirmation. But, when I saw you do this thing, this is the impact that it had on the room. This is how I perceived it. This is how I think others perceived it. What do you think about that? Tell them what the problem is, clearly stated, get their feedback. They respond, blah, blah, blah. Well, hey, next time I'd love to try and do this. And if you don't, like, we'll have to figure out what's next after this. So make it clear there's consequences. And then, but I love having you here. Keep being here. Let's go have some fun together. You end with affirmation. It's super simple. Nowhere in there do we call a student a racist. It's totally insane, but yet insane things tend to be everywhere right now. So I'm not completely shocked by it.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So helpful. Thank you, just for sharing such good insight. And again, go to episode 122 or they dive in even a little bit more into that. So recently you mentioned at the top of the interview here is that you have transitioned into a new role. And so you've been real public and open and transparent about your transition from Sandals and kind of what you've learned from there. And so I know that in this season, there's a lot of people that are transitioning. And so what were some of those things that you learned from that time? How did you kind of walk through? I think you said it was about 16 months. So walk us through some of that journey.
Well, there's a lot of, I've talked about this a bunch on my podcast, other podcasts. So this is, and with every month that goes by, it's like a different layer gets pulled away. It exposes a little more. I get to see a little more. Time. People say time heals things. Time actually doesn't heal things. Time gives you the opportunity to really dissect and pull out the infection, every little bit, every little ounce of it, so that none of that diseased area exists anymore. That's what time gives you. So I've just started a job with a nonprofit, super excited about it. And, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to get back into ministry yet. Sandals was, a big debacle, blew up in my face in a big way. And there's a lot of different things that I'd point to. All those things I would take ownership of. One of the big things I'd say that over the last couple months I've really, put time exposing into is the idea of ego. There's a guy named Jocko. I read his book, Extreme Ownership, really, really smart guy, former Navy SEAL, really great dude. He wrote a new book called Leadership Strategies and Tactics. I had the opportunity to have him on my podcast to talk about that, which was absolutely awesome. And through that, because he's in San Diego and I'm up in Orange County, Riverside area, I got the opportunity to go down there and spend a half day with him. And we had lunch. We did some jujitsu. He totally kicked my ass. It was great. He could have gone a lot harder, but he didn't, because I was a butterball at the time. And the whole conversation was about ego, because at its core, I went to Sandals feeling like, I was the guy at Mariners. Like, I knew stuff. Like it was pretty big deal that I was coming here, right? Like they were, the interview process was pretty fast. They were really excited to have me. But that ego that I had of feeling like I kind of knew. And so when people would give me criticism or negative feedback, I'd kind of view it as that's great, but I'm not here for no reason. I kind of know what I'm talking about. And that ego wouldn't allow me to hear critical things. It wouldn't allow me to self-assess. That ego, and which is different than pride. I think ego comes before pride. Pride is the action of behavior. Ego is the way we view ourselves. We have a deep ego about us. We have pride in our actions, and people can see that. People can't see ego. You can have a strong ego and still live in a very healthy way. I had a very strong ego and lived in a very unhealthy way. And so I think over the last few months of really understanding how to put ego aside and speak honestly and speak with humility, and know you're not going to have every answer, and stop trying to please everybody with every one of your answers, and be okay with failure. It changed me. It changed the way I viewed myself as a leader. And I think it really got me ready to step back into ministry, which I have now. And I'm really happy with this nonprofit I'm in. But, already I had one big blunder. I had it's different. You report to a board. It's different than having, one boss. Like I have a board of people that I report to, and we were doing a grant proposal to our biggest donor. They give us hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I filled it all out. And I fill it out like I usually fill out things like that. You're not just filling out for the here and now. You're kind of talking about what your plan is for the future. little did I know that it's not just a matter of me as the executive director saying, hey, this is the vision for the future. It's actually something that you have to go back to the board and kind of share with them and get they literally vote on, and like it's very Robert Rules of Order. You kind of share like, these are the things I'm planning on doing, and they vote on like, all right, this is the direction we're saying yes to. I missed all that. So it actually became a big issue. And the old part of me would have said, well, you know what, I'm a seasoned leader, and this is a mistake, but you guys probably should have told me this. How do you expect me to know? But the truth is that it was my screw up, and that's okay that I blew it, and I'm going to own it, and I'm going to be honest about it. And I'm new to the nonprofit space. I have no idea. And so there is no ego. That one piece has changed my entire perspective, how I lead myself and lead other people. And if it wasn't for Sandals being the way that it is, I never would have had the opportunity to learn that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Real quick, a couple tips for those that are in a season of transition. What would you suggest that they do during this time? Some helpful things that you learned through your process.
Yeah. Regardless of how it went, you have to take ownership of your part in it. Okay. Doesn't matter what the transition was. Doesn't matter why you transition. Doesn't matter how you transition. Doesn't matter all the elders and this and that and everyone's opinions and their feet. None of that. Just put all that stuff and put it over here in the crap box. And we're going to put it over there on the side because no one cares about what's in that box. You got to take ownership of whatever that thing was, however the whole transition went down. You have a big part to play in it. And I know that it's easy for you to make excuses. It was easy for me to make excuses. Just don't. Just own it, because once you own it, you can start moving on from it. I would probably say number 2, take time for yourself. Figure out what that is. I know not everyone has the time. I got a severance package, and I was generously able to hop into a new job. I did sales for a while, which I really enjoyed. But sometimes getting back into ministry doesn't mean getting right back into ministry. I knew I would always get back into ministry. Like I kind of knew that, but it didn't mean I was getting right back into ministry. It was my wife who said, hey, we should take some time off. And, I got the sales job, and it ended up being great. Taking time off means maybe you're going to do something completely different from ministry for a while. Maybe it means you're going to do something completely outside the vocation so that you can take time just kind of getting healthy and repairing yourself. I think we always forget to do self-care because we screw that first step up. Because if the transition, whatever it was, is everyone else's problem, then there is nothing for us to do self-care on other than licking our wounds for how bad they hurt us. And then it's easy for us to jump right back into a job. But the truth is, it isn't all them. It's a lot of it's us. We do need to do self-care, not just for the wounds of what happened, but for why it happened. What part of me allowed that to happen? Put time into fixing that. So when you go into the next place, you're not bringing in all that baggage with you. I'll give you a quick example. I was in a relationship once. I'm not going to go into great detail with it, but it was a romantic relationship, and the person had just ended a very serious relationship with their former person, and I could see that they haven't worked through a lot of the stuff from that. And I told them, listen, if we're going to keep going, you need to get into counseling to work a lot of that stuff out because you haven't worked it out, and I'm the one paying the price for it. You'll bring all that baggage with you into the next place, and they're going to look at you and be like, whoa, we don't want to deal with this stuff from the last place. We thought, hopefully you've worked through that. If you haven't, you're never going to be able to truly launch into something new if you're still being dragged down by the baggage of something old. And I'd probably say the last thing is there is a tomorrow. But with everything, I love how God created things. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. This is very simple stuff. Okay? We're born, we live a whole life, and we die, and hopefully we have hope for heaven. We have faith for what's next. For a lot of people, they don't. That's a tough deal for them. It's not for us. We're Christians. We have Jesus. But in situations like this, you got fired or got whatever the situation, got let go, transition, downsize, whatever. Okay, there's a beginning to that. There's a middle to this whole thing. There's going to be an end to that season. I don't know when it's going to be. It might be a year from now. It might be 6 months from now. It might be 18 months from now in my case. But there will be an end to it. If you've done nothing to prepare yourself, when you get to the end, you're going to realize that you're actually really right back at the beginning. And you're going to regret it. The work of self-work is really hard work. 6 months from now, and this is something you need to self-assess. You just need to look in the mirror and say to yourself, in 6 months from now, do I want to celebrate the accomplishments that I've created, or do I want to look back and wish I would have done something? So look in the mirror and say, okay, mirror, me, in 6 months from now, do I want to celebrate the accomplishments of the growth that I've made? Or in 6 months from now, do I want to regret wishing I would have done something 6 months ago? And every single one of us would say, we want to be the first person. We want to be the person to celebrate and be happy with the accomplishments that we've made over the investment of time. That doesn't come easy. There's hard work involved, but you can do it. I've done it. I know others who've done it. And I know others who haven't. I know others who've been out of ministry 5 years, some more, because they cannot deal. They just can't deal with it. They can't take ownership of their faults. They can't see, they bounce around church to church to church. They're the journeyman of churches because they can't look in the mirror and say, you know what, there's something wrong in me and how I lead people, how I treat people, how I act. That's no bueno. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. So we were talking before we started the interview here about your time with Jocko. So I want to end with this question.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about how that time with Jocko helped you, and what are some of the things that you're doing to stay renewed and refreshed in your journey?
Yeah. So here's the thing about Jocko. He doesn't speak the language that we speak in the church often. There's no one who's better at the talk than the church. We're willing to make every excuse for ourselves and everyone else, when the reality is we don't need excuses. We need accountability. We need someone to kick us in and say, hey, listen, you're actually to blame for this. This is actually on you, and you need to take ownership of it. You need to live in that fact, and you need to, and we're willing to help you figure out how to move forward in this. The church is notoriously terrible at it. The military is not terrible at it. And everything that Jocko's been doing, I mean, he is teaching people how to do that in organizations. He works with churches and nonprofits and whatnot. But the thing about Jocko is that he did not give me an inch to make an excuse. He wrote the book on extreme ownership. So he was able to just tell me the hard truth to my face. He didn't care about if I liked him or not afterwards. He didn't care about my feelings. He cared about me asking the question and him giving me a truthful answer. And that's exactly what he did. It was great. I'd probably say that the thing that's helped me pass that conversation is things even just like this, talking about it. I'm not ashamed of having problems that I needed help fixing. I'm not bothered by the fact I couldn't do it myself. I'm not embarrassed that I needed to go to others in order to get their feedback, their support, their help. And after the whole thing, now that I'm able to look with a certain level of perspective, as I have conversations even just like this, or I was having lunch with, my buddy Doug Fields, 2 weeks ago, and I told him all about this. And it's not a thing to be ashamed of, saying, yeah, I really let my ego get the best of me, and I'm kind of, embarrassed of that. It's not it. I had an ego problem. My ego problem led to my failure, and now I've finally been able to expose that as a truth, and now I'm going to do something different about it. And hey, listen, because you're a trusted friend, if you ever see that in me, I want you to call out on me immediately. Don't worry about my feelings being hurt. Care about me and who I'm becoming more than you care about yourself and your own feelings and your own security, being brutalized by, maybe I'm not going to like you after this. Now, Fields, that's not him. He doesn't care about that. But most people, you really have to give them permission to tell you the hard truth, because they're not going to want to, because chances are they don't want to hear the hard truth. And I think for me, walking away from that convo with Jocko, which again was one of 10 discussions that, really intentional discussions I had with people through that journey of health. That was the last one I needed. And it really was the big one. It was the important one to tie them all together.
I love it. Well, hey, Justin, thank you so much for your time. It's been really helpful to hear about junior high ministry, transitioning and, making sure you have those hard conversations to drill down deep into your life. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
It was great being here, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up.